Vietnam is on the cusp of something big, really big. Last year, in 2024, the country's exports hit a staggering $403 billion, up 13.8% from the year before, blowing past the growth rates of neighbors like Malaysia and Thailand. That's not just a number, it's a signal. Ships loaded with containers are streaming out of ports like Haiphong, carrying everything from AirPods to virtual reality headsets. Destined for places like the US, where exports surged by 23.4% to $120 billion. Compare that to Malaysia's 5.6% or Thailand's 5.4% export growth. And you start to see Vietnam pulling ahead in a way that's hard to ignore. What's driving this? A mix of a strong US economy and a global supply chain shuffle, with companies rerouting production away from China. But here's the kicker: if Vietnam can lock in one key piece, protecting the private property rights of foreign investors, this growth could go from impressive to exponential. Think about it. Companies like Apple, Meta, and Samsung aren't just dipping their toes in Vietnam's waters, they're diving in. Apple's supplier count in Vietnam jumped from 27 in 2023 to 35 in 2024, the most in Southeast Asia. By this year, 2025, Vietnam is set to produce 20% of all iPads and Apple Watches, 65% of AirPods, and even 5% of MacBooks. Meta's jumping in too, starting production of its Quest 3S headsets, creating 1,000 jobs. Samsung, already a heavyweight with two massive factories accounting for 15.8% of Vietnam's exports in 2023, is pouring another $1.8 billion into a new OLED plant. South Korea's Haesung Group is planning a $4 billion investment. These aren't small bets, but what keeps what these giants, these giants coming back, and what could make them commit even more? It's the promise of stability, knowing their factories, their tech, their profits are safe. That's where private property rights come in. If Vietnam can guarantee foreign investors that their assets won't be seized, their contracts won't be meddled with, and their operations can run smoothly, the floodgates could open. Capital loves certainty, and Vietnam could become a magnet for it. Now, let's peel back a layer. A big chunk of this boom ties back to the US China rivalry. For years, tensions have been simmering, and with US sanctions tightening, like the export controls rolled out by the Biden administration in December 2024, Chinese enterprises are looking for an escape hatch. Vietnam's right next door, with lower labor costs and a government eager to welcome factories. It's no surprise that as China's export demand weakens, Vietnam's exports to China dropped 2% in 2024. The US is picking up the slack. Quarterly data from the ASEAN Secretariat shows it plain as day. In July to September 2024, the 10 ASEAN countries' exports to the US hit $80 billion, outpacing the $72 billion sent to China, which fell 2% from the year before. Semiconductors and machinery are leading the charge. Vietnam's US-bound exports in that category leaped 33% in that quarter. Chinese firms facing tariffs and restrictions at home are setting up shop in Vietnam to keep their supply chains humming. It's a clever workaround, and Vietnam's reaping the rewards. But here's where it gets tricky. This growth, dazzling as it is, isn't without risks. A lot of it hinges on those Chinese enterprises using Vietnam as a staging ground to dodge US sanctions. If the US catches on and decides to widen its net, say by expanding those foreign direct product rules to cover more goods or sectors, it could hit American companies too, the ones who've set up in Vietnam to diversify away from China. Imagine a scenario where the US slaps tariffs on goods produced by Chinese owned factories in Vietnam. Suddenly, that shiny $451 billion export target Vietnam's government set for 2025, up 12% from 2024, starts looking shaky. Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh knows it. He's already warning about a looming global trade war. We must avoid being passive, caught off guard, or missing good opportunities, he said in a recent meeting. He's right. Vietnam's riding a wave, but it's a wave that could crash if the geopolitics shift. So, how does Vietnam turn this moment into something lasting? It circles back to those property rights. If foreign investors, whether American, South Korean, or even Chinese, know their investments are ironclad, they'll dig in deeper. A factory isn't just a building, it's a commitment. When Apple builds a plant or Samsung pours billions into OLED screens, they're not planning to pack up and leave next year, but they need assurance. Vietnam's already got the geography, the workforce, and the momentum. Add legal protections that rival those in more established hubs, and you've got a recipe for exponential growth. The Nikkei Asia report hints at it. Vietnam's exports nearly doubled from $214 billion in 2017 to $403 billion in 2024. With the right moves, that trajectory could steepen dramatically. Still, the Chinese factor looms large. It's not just about dodging sanctions today, it's about what happens tomorrow. If US China tensions escalate, say with Trump's latest tariff threats, like the 25% on steel and aluminum announced in early 2025, Vietnam could get caught in the crossfire. Chinese firms might keep flooding in, but if their output gets tagged as made in China by proxy, the US could clamp down. That's the risk Vietnam's juggling. Yet, it's also an opportunity. By positioning itself as a neutral, reliable hub, not just a backdoor for China, Vietnam could draw in a broader mix of players. Think Japan, Europe, even India, all looking for a stable base in a turbulent world. Picture this: a decade from now, Vietnam's not just an export star, but a global manufacturing powerhouse. Cities like Haiphong buzzing with factories, workers, and innovation. Exports soaring past $800 billion, maybe more. It's not a pipe dream, it's within reach. The data backs it up. Vietnam's outpacing its peers, capitalizing on supply chain shifts, and winning over tech giants. But the foundation has to hold. Strengthening private property rights could be the glue that keeps it all together, turning a China-driven boom into a Vietnam-led transformation. Yes, the risks are real. Sanctions, trade wars, geopolitical curveballs. But the upside, it's exponential. Vietnam's got the chance to not just ride this wave, but to steer it. And if they play it right, the world might be talking about the Vietnam miracle for decades to come.